Hey, so in this video, we're going to be talking about grief and what it does to our nervous system and how to process it. But first, I'm going to tell you about my story and my real life experience to help you have some context, and then I can show you what happened to me and what my nervous system did. So a couple months ago, I lost my dad unexpectedly, and it completely wrecked me. It destroyed me. It was unexpected, and I think for anyone, when you lose someone you love, it's heart-wrenching. It's difficult to manage, and then you have all these emotions and you just don't know what to do with it. And a lot of times we're not taught what to do with our emotions, especially when it comes to grief, because especially in the Western world, we don't really talk about death. We don't necessarily celebrate it or honor it or bring it to light as much as some other countries may have, or as much as some other countries do, such as, when someone passes in Bali, they hold this huge party and it's a big celebration, whereas for us in the Western world, it's a little bit more somber. And so when we lose someone we love, we have all these emotions that we're just not sure what to do with and how to manage. And so let's jump into what those emotions can do to our nervous system and healthy ways to actually process grief. Of course, doing that is different for everyone, but hopefully I can provide you with some tips and tools that can help. So for me, when my dad passed, it completely put me into more of a dorsal state. Now, for you to understand what that is, I'm going to talk about the nervous system a little bit. So this is in context to polyvagal theory, which was pioneered by Stephen Porges. And he talks about there's 3 states of our nervous system. Now, there's blended states, but there's 3 main states, and those are the ones that we're going to be talking about today. So we have dorsal, which is where you disengage, you freeze, you kind of see the world as threatening, right? And then you have sympathetic, which is our flight or fight state, where you see the world as overwhelming. And then you have ventral, which is our flow state, our happy state, where there's social connection and engagement and that really home state where you can thrive in and you're not afraid of your safety. Okay, so to go over those again, we have dorsal, which is that freeze, disengaged state. Then we have sympathetic, which is our flight or fight, to get out of there, that fast energy, that move, need to do something, which is where that chronic stress can live. And then we have ventral, which is that happy, connected state. Now, some of you may have a home away from home, or most of us have a home away from home. And what I mean by that is home is ventral, where we're connected, we're safe, we're happy. That's where we want to thrive in, right? But sympathetic can help us get things done. That can help us get things achieved, or, in a threatening situation, get us out of there. So all these states have a purpose. And like I was saying, the home away home, either you're more comfortable in sympathetic or you're more comfortable in dorsal. So for myself, I was really comfortable in sympathetic. Like I could be in ventral and then drop into sympathetic and be like, let's do all these things that need to get done. This was like my coach yelling, let's go, let's go, let's go. And I could use that energy to help push myself. And then when my dad passed, I just completely dropped out of ventral. Instead of being in that happy flow, connected state, I felt like the world was overwhelming. I felt like my support just got pulled out from under my rug. Now, context with that as well is my mom passed when I was 11, and my stepdad, or my dad that I'm talking about, is the one who stepped in and really filled that role. He was the one that raised me when she passed and was really everything for me, right? And so losing him just like completely pulled out that support system. And so that's a lot of emotions I would have to sit and process, right? Those are a lot of emotions that have to be experienced in order to be healed. And so that took me into sympathetic, where I was feeling like the world was just overwhelming, and then dropping into dorsal. So instead of feeling or thriving in that ventral state, I was stuck in sympathetic, where I was overwhelmed, flight or fight. The world was just like chronic stress, and dropping into dorsal, where I would just disengage, where I didn't want to get out of bed, where I just couldn't be present, so I'd be in situations, even like happy situations, the family would be together and I just felt just like withdrawn, totally disengaged. And that's because that trauma had triggered my nervous system to be in a different state, right? So we'll definitely talk more in other videos about polyvagal theory and go into the science behind it, but just for this video, you just need to understand that there is those 3 states, the dorsal, sympathetic, and ventral, and that when trauma happens, or like losing a loved one, it can put you in a certain state and you can get stuck there. So when you're stuck, let's say in sympathetic, that means you could have anxiety. That could show up as anxiety. Now, if you're stuck in dorsal for a long period of time, that means you're stuck, that means, or when you're stuck in dorsal for a long period of time, that can present itself as depression, right? So these states are really important because it's the way we show up in the world. It's the way we respond to the world. So if you're stuck in sympathetic and you're seeing your environment as dangerous instead of what may not be so dangerous, right? So because you're in that flight or fight state, you're seeing things as threatening. So when we have grief, not only can it change our nervous system, but then we have these emotions that we just don't know how to process. And the most important thing to do is feel those emotions. And that's what a lot of people would tell me. And logically, I get it. But sometimes it's really hard to feel those emotions. And for me, I'd rather be in denial saying, no, this can't happen, this isn't real, than actually sit with that truth and feel that. Because then I would have to accept that my mom and him are both really gone. And that's a hard truth to sit with. That's a lot of feelings, right? Like, I think the next thing that's most difficult with grief is it's forever. Like, there is no end date. You know, like if you break your arm, you can say, okay, I'm in pain right now, the healing process, maybe in a couple weeks, you know, in a couple months, I'll be totally fine. There's an end date, and there's like rehab, and you have someone that says, this is how you maneuver your arm in order to, you know, with the physiotherapy, that's how you do this, and that's what's going to build the muscle back, and this is how you heal it, and then in X amount of time, it should feel better. But that doesn't happen with grief. We have no end date. So you feel the most intense emotions you've ever felt. You have no tools in your toolbox to help you process them, and it just feels, you know, maybe overwhelming or daunting or suffocating, you know, like those heavy types of feelings. And so the very first most important thing to do is to feel those emotions and to actually sit with them. And that there may be some resistance, because I can tell you there was for me. And I was like, well, what's the point? Like, I'm just gonna sit there and bawl my eyes out. Like, what good is that gonna do? That's because I'm very goal oriented, and I like to have end dates, and I like to know why certain things I'm implementing, why when I do certain things, what the process is gonna be and the end result. And so just like feeling your emotions and letting them go seems stupid, I'll be honest. But the thing is I'm gonna give you an analogy here, is let's say you have a sponge and it's soaked up all the water. Now you can't really use the sponge anymore because it soaked up all the water, and it's slowly gonna be leaking out that water that it's full of. And it's the same thing with emotions, that you get filled with all these emotions, and feeling them and crying them out is like wringing out that sponge so you can use it again. But a lot of times we hold all the emotions and we don't process them, and so things start getting backed up. The sponge isn't working at like it used to. It can't absorb any more water. And when you're holding emotions like grief, especially because it's such a big an emotion, your body can start internalizing them and then presenting them as physical ailments. So for me, I was having such bad chest pain. I was also having lower back pain and headaches periodically. And I knew, because I have this knowledge, I knew it was that I wasn't processing my grief, and so my body needed to say, hey, we have something that's here important to heal. You're not paying attention to it, so we're gonna do something so you do. So we're gonna start making your body actually feel it so that you pay attention to it and actually process these emotions. So the very first most important thing to do when grieving is to actually feel the emotions and know that whatever they are is okay. No matter however you're feeling is okay. And you don't need to explain them, identify them. You don't need to judge them, that you just literally sit with them and feel them. And once you've gone through that process, which could take a very long time, right? There's times where you feel okay, and then all of a sudden it comes on as a tidal wave. And my mom passed when I was 11, so that was, you know, over 20 years ago. And that still hits me sometimes, right? So like, I could be hanging out at the beach and all of a sudden I hear a song that reminds me of her, and it could hit really hard. Or, you know, there's just those little things that can remind you of that person that you lost, and it comes back like a tidal wave. So with grief, there is no end date, and those emotions still come back, but over time, you're able to appreciate them instead of feel like you're drowning by them or being drowned by them, right? So it's like when that memory comes up, you're able to say, oh God, you know, and have that appreciation for that person. And sometimes it takes a while to get there, right? Like I couldn't even listen to voicemails of my dad. I couldn't look at pictures. Like I needed that time to like be acceptance of that, right? And that's okay. We all grieve differently and there's a different process. But like I was saying, number one is to really sit with those emotions and feel them. Number two is eventually you'll learn a lesson from that loss. Now, I've been specifically talking about the death of a person, right? So that's because it's relatable. My dad passed. But that also could be the death of a relationship. Maybe you were with a partner and now you break up, or you lose a job, or you have a death of a pet, right? So there's loss in other means. And with all of those, there's always a lesson of rebirth, right? So with death, there's a new lesson to learn. And to not have that loss or that death be in vain and learn that lesson from it. And so what I can tell you, since my dad passed, my brothers and sisters and I were like way more closer. We've gone together 2 times that we probably wouldn't have if my dad hadn't passed away, right? So, although we were close before, now because he passed, we're like, oh my God, family means so much more. And it shed light upon things that we were taking for granted. And so we started learning that lesson, saying, okay, well, he's not here anymore, but what would he have wanted us to do? Or what can I learn from this loss? Maybe if it is a job, saying, maybe it wasn't the right path for me and now I'm not working that, so can I start my own business? What am I truly passionate about? So taking that loss and eventually learning a lesson from it. Obviously, that's not something you can do right away because there is a lot of pain. So that's why I'm saying first, feel those emotions and sit with it. Have someone support you through it if you want or if you can. Sometimes I just like to cry by myself and not have to have someone there to witness it. But sometimes it feels nice to have Dante with me and to soothe my pain and just be a shoulder to cry on. So whatever feels right? So allowing yourself to express those emotions and know that you don't have to judge it or label it, or it doesn't have to be anything. It just allow yourself to feel it, and then eventually learn that lesson from that loss. So those are the 2 most powerful things I can tell you with grief, and that when your nervous system experiences such trauma that it can be dysregulated for a little bit, and you could be responding in a way that you wouldn't normally. So I can tell you for myself that I was a lot more on edge and irritable, and so I was responding to things in my environment with more anger and just quickness and snappiness, and I can notice that in myself. It's like, oh, this isn't myself, what's going on? Being like, okay, obviously, I'm experiencing these emotions that are trying to be healed, so they're leaking out in some sort of way. So for you, if you've lost someone or you're in the process of grieving, I really support you, and I see you and I hear you, and I know it can be difficult, but remember that you're not alone, and